What about other constituencies that maybe aren't heard from enough? And I'll pick one specifically. I remember a few years ago, guys, when James Comey, he's police chief in Jersey City. Remember when those 3 cops were shot by a guy with a rap sheet longer than my arm here? And he outgunned the cops. He literally got his hands on weapons that won't be issued to police. And he went out there and he said, "You got it," in pretty salty language, "It's time that we're stop afraid of the NRA here and stand up." And I said, you know what? People will never associate law and order with bleeding heart liberals, whether it's fair or not. They're going to throw that label around. These are the guys in the front lines. And when they say, why should these guys have body armor? Why should they have armor-piercing bullets? Why should they have bigger guns than cops? I thought that would resonate. How difficult has it been, because I know the Fraternal Order of Police supports what you guys are saying, to really engage them in the issue to make them front and center on this?
I mean, I think it's a good point. I mean, if we can just go back in time to 2003, 2004, when the federal assault weapons ban was up for reauthorization, we worked around the country to enlist law enforcement. Over 2,000 police chiefs. These are the chiefs of small towns, big towns. They supported not only just reauthorizing the bill, but strengthening it, and also banning armor-piercing ammunition. They were on record. 2,000 chiefs. That's quite a bit. Around 38 states, I think it was. But that still wasn't enough. And also, when you talked about campuses before, campus law enforcement, when it comes to keeping concealed weapons off campus, they are in line 100%. They do not want those weapons on campus. One of the main reasons is they can't tell the good guys from the bad guys. So we definitely have law enforcement on our side on this, and it's an important constituency. But I also just want to say quickly about the federal bill. We had a vote in the Senate. We had a vote, and we had a majority of senators voted our way. But for these strange rules that the Senate has, we didn't get to 60 votes. On the House side, we've got nearly 190 co-sponsors of a background check bill right now. That is a lot more than we had for the Brady bill going back over 20 years ago. So there is some movement. It's positive. We need the public to stay with us, though, and keep the pressure on. If we can keep the pressure on, I think things will change when we get into the spring time of next year.
In terms of messaging, Joe Nocera from the Times, I think, does a really good job where he doesn't just talk about the school massacres. He talks about the other senseless violence that happens in every day, and more than 30,000 people every year. It's not a new phenomenon, have died in this country at the end of a gun. But I think it's the challenge, and in the media here, it's on me too, but to keep reminding people that it's not just the 12 people that died in a single thing. It's the day after day in the cities and the suburbs and the rural community. Have you guys found one messaging point when people see it and they understand that it's daily, hourly in this country, that the cumulative may be even more a shock to the system than just the sensational that they'll see?
Sure. I mean, the statistic that a child is injured or killed by a gun every 30 minutes. So you watch a football game, they last about 3 hours now with the new rules. 6 children, 6 families have either been killed or injured during the course of that football game. I think that's powerful. But you're right, it's not just about school shootings or mall shootings. It's about the daily violence that we have in our inner cities and outside of our inner cities. Suicides, accidental shootings. Right now, one thing New York State could do is pass a Safe Storage Act, something to make sure that gun owners, most of whom are already doing this, keep their guns when in households for their children safe. Other states have these laws. New York has fairly porous laws on that. Talking about the impact on families and children and the daily grind, I think is very important, because otherwise we just get these peaks and valleys in interest when there are mass shootings where, as you mentioned, the real problem is the daily grind of gun violence throughout the country.
I thought maybe there's another way to this, and he just touched on it, which is, Andy, is there a way to criminalize, civilly and criminally, the person who not even does an illegal straw sale? I mean, take, God forbid, what happened in Newtown. If Mr. Lanza didn't turn on the gun on his mother first, she bought him an arsenal. Let him have a gun safe in the house. That if it can be proven that there was irresponsibility in securing the weapon, providing the weapon, or whatever else, I oversimplify this, but I remember I grew up in a place where the parties where the kids were getting out of hand. All of a sudden, when the parents knew that if something happened, somebody got in that car and drove home from that party, they were going to be liable and lose everything they had, magically the party stopped and there were at least some sort of responsibility. Is there a way to do that through the courts that would make people think twice about who they give guns to, how they secure them, and that there is a cause and effect to this?
Right. I mean, there's a couple of things you could do. One is, as Justin alluded to, passing a strong child access prevention law in New York. It's something that's been talked about for many, many years in New York.
We ever see widespread smart guns that people would actually buy, not
smart
that make,
guns
but
is another.
buy?
New Jersey signed that into law years ago. I think when McGreevey was the governor, it was quite a while ago, and they're starting to talk about that technology again. The other is focusing on lost and stolen weapons, and that's something New York did 13 years ago, making not making criminalizing it, but giving the owner the chance to give them a 24-hour, 48-hour window to report, because we find that a lot of guns are actually stolen and then subsequently used. But so if the owner can report that, so there are a few things I think that we can do. I'm not an attorney, so Justin could maybe speak to this better in terms of what could happen in the courts, but child access prevention laws, having them in the 50 states, and having mandatory lost and stolen reporting, those are two small things that could make a difference.
We'll come back again to legislatively, because that's seemingly was where the change will happen, Ashley or not. You yourself are going to be a candidate here in the state Senate, and you're going to be running against Greg Ball.
That's right.
We've had Mr. Ball is always entertaining on the program, but he savaged the Journal News when they created that database of the gun owners. And I argue that had a national impact. Right? If you trace back where the national dialogue was going on at the time, that fed into this conspiracy of this overreaching government that's going to be knocking down people's doors, when that never was a reality, but it kind of fit in very convenient to the narrative at the time. Talk about how, with a very divided electorate in the district that you would hope to represent, you convince people that there's a way to have regulation without eliminating rights, because he's certainly going to argue a vote for you is a vote to take away their Second Amendment privilege or right.
Sure. Well, Senator Ball's record on gun safety speaks for itself. It's fairly extreme. What worries me more are people who support gun safety legislation, who hear the conventional wisdom that the NRA is very organized. You should really keep your head down on this one. I reject that. Our mothers, our daughters, our neighbors are dying, and people that don't speak out are absolute cowards. And so while others are going to run away from this issue, I'll run head into it. And I'll tell you, the polls are on our side. That's not the reason I care about it, but gun safety legislation is popular. Banning assault weapons, background checks, heck, a majority of NRA members support background checks.
But will they vote against somebody who disagrees with them? I know on the other side they'll vote against anyone that would restrict their rights, but even though the plurality is with you, it doesn't seem that they have the same passion to penalize a lawmaker if they don't share their views on some kind of background checks or whatever else.
Sure, well, you have to make the case, and I know that, and that's what a campaign's about, but it's at the end of the day, it's about values. And I talked about Greg's record against banning assault weapons, against background checks. He voted against strengthening penalties for the use of armor-piercer bullets. Who's for cop killer bullets? Criminals? So we have to make that case in a broader values narrative, because at the end of the day, this isn't just about gun safety, it's about public safety, and it's about what we want our representatives to stand for. And I think you have to make that case. You can't keep your head down low. That's why I'm on the show now, and that's why I'll be talking to folks in the Hudson Valley about this issue throughout 2014.
All right, Justin, thank you. Final thing, Andy. Unfortunately, I think the percentages and history is with me that if we sat down a year from now, there will be more tragedies. And they'll take all the forms that sadly we've seen here before. Will there be anything different coming out of Washington, out of state capitals, that will make it harder for bad or troubled people to be able to get a hold of these tools of destruction?
I mean, I think that legislation strengthening gun laws is a piece of the puzzle. I mean, we have other issues that come into play when it comes to gun violence, whether it's better educational opportunities, poverty, things like that, other crimes. What we work on is trying to strengthen laws, and we know in states where we have strong gun laws, like a New York, like a California, like a Connecticut, like Delaware, we have very low gun death rates compared to states like Texas and Florida and Georgia and places like that. So we know strong laws work, and they don't infringe on anyone's ability to own or possess a weapon. So I'm optimistic, as I said. I've been at this for 17 years. I think that if we can stay focused, if we can continue to work on the advocacy, the education, and the political side of this. The political side is very important. We need to be working on elections
You
also.
think it's better to do it at the state level rather than try again at the federal level?
I think it's both. I think it's not an either or. I mean, I've worked more on the state level in the years I've worked on this issue, but I know how important it is to pass something federally. It's not an either or, because while we are winning in a few states, as Justin mentioned, we've taken steps back in places like Florida, Georgia, Texas, things like that.
Yeah.
So we've got to stay focused on both levels of government, and I think we can be successful.
Knock on wood. Andy, Justin, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
appreciate a few. We'll be right back in RFL right after this.